Let us discuss the games of Saturday. And what's interesting is there's some matchups on this board that look fantastic at the start of the year. You're like, really, with 10 games left, these guys are going to be playing each other? And now you're looking and going, really, these games are against each other with 10 games left? It's funny because for all of the teams on the board, there aren't a lot of marquee matchups. There aren't a lot that I'm going to be looking at and going, man, I'm going to miss that. So tomorrow, I work from 2 o'clock Pacific till 10 o'clock. I miss the majority of what goes on tomorrow. I can see the early morning games partly. I still have to go to work, so I'll miss the end of them. And I'm not going to be in a position where I can listen to them either, so it's all around. It's life. Life is like that. Isn't it fun? All right. First up, Chicago Buffalo. This is one of those games, man. Like at the start of the year, we were like, hey, Chicago's going to be just cruising. And they get to go into Buffalo. Yeah. They're 30, 33, and 8. They're 4 and 6 in their last 10. They lost their last game. It's been reported that Berube is starting for Chicago. It doesn't matter. They're in Buffalo. Buffalo's 22, 36, and 12. They're 5, 4, and 1 in their last 10. They've lost their last 2 games. And they're in 31st. And Johnson's been confirmed as a starter for Buffalo. Again, it doesn't matter. Johnson's playing for a job next year, though, wherever he ends up. I think his time in the NHL is probably at an end. But remember, I said that last year about Darcy Kemper, too. And he's got a new fresh deal from the Arizona Coyotes. So the way this goes is these are two teams playing out the stretch. And, you know, I like to give equal time to teams as much as possible. But I don't see that there's a whole lot to report on here. Crawford's not coming back. He's probably shut down for the year. Is there much point in bringing Crawford back right now? Even if he's good to go, do you really want to bring Crawford back in this mess? And it's a mess. And again, we'll get into the way forward for both of these teams when the seasons are over. But for Buffalo fans, they had to feel good tonight watching Evander Kane get 4 goals because the better San Jose does, the better that draft pick gets. Am I right? The Buffalo's playing out the string. Reinhardt's playing some fantastic hockey right now, but it doesn't matter. Their results are still not where they need to be. And if you want a number 1 draft pick, or at least the best shot at getting one, you're probably glad that they're not. Next up, the Oilers. They're 30, 35, and 5 altogether. They're 5, 4, and 1 in their last 10, but they've lost their last 2. So the Oilers are showing some fight. Well, now they're going into Florida. Florida's 35, 26, and 7 altogether. They're 8, 1, and 1 in their last 10. They won their last game. Talbot's been confirmed as a starter for Edmonton. And Luongo is the likely starter for Florida. Reimer got the start in the last game, which was a 3-0 shutout over Boston, which showed these guys are for real, which they have to keep showing over and over again. They're 3 points behind New Jersey with 2 games in hand. So, again, Florida, if they want to make those games in hand work, the fact they and New Jersey both play tomorrow night, Florida has to win. Every single game is a must-win. They did this to themselves early in the year. When I was watching the game between them and Boston, and they talked to I'm trying to remember which member of the Florida Panthers staff they talked to about the way that Florida's been doing. I know it was Dale Talon, who said that, you know, things were going okay and he felt good about the team going forward. And I thought, and all I could think was, yeah, but didn't it take too long for them to get going? I mean, at the end of the year, if they end up missing the playoffs by 2 or 3 points, aren't you going to look back on some of those losses they had and lament them? Of course, if Florida misses the playoffs by 2 or 3 points and then wins the draft lottery, let the conspiracy theories begin, right? So Florida has something to play for, and Edmonton really doesn't, other than pride. Edmonton's still 5 games below 500, and that's fake 500. Real 500. They'd be 30 and 40 because of the overtime and shootout losses. But the Oilers are a team that I'm kind of curious to see what happens next year, because of course Yamamoto is going to get another shot. Puljujarvi will have a full-time shot for the full year, and a guy like Benson could come along. I'm just using that as an example. there are some things to like with the Oilers organization, but they really desperately need a blue liner. They need that horse on the blue line. Like Nurse is good. I think Clefbaum's going to bounce back, but they really need that big top two guy. Sekera has really never lived up to that contract fully, and it's really showing this year. Next up. So, New Jersey, as I mentioned over here, they're 36-26-8 overall. They're 5-5 in their last 10. They've won their last 2. They're in LA against the Kings. The Kings are 39-26-6, 6-3-1 in their last 10, and they won their last game. New Jersey right now is the number 2 wild card. They're 1 point behind Columbus. As mentioned, they're 3 points out of Florida. The LA Kings are third in the division. They're 3 points behind San Jose, but they're tied with Anaheim. So Anaheim and LA are tied for points with 84, and Anaheim's outside the playoffs right now. It's that tight in the West. There's that much parity in the West right now. Jersey has to go in and do something that isn't as difficult as it would have been other seasons, and that is lay a defeat on the Kings at home. The Kings are one of those weird teams that they're slightly better on the road than they are at home, and for the Devils, it doesn't seem to matter a whole lot either. So, if the Devils can go in tomorrow night and get a win, and Florida gets a loss, well, that changes the complexion of things. Then Florida's 5 points back with 2 games in hand, which means they're not in control of anything. So again, the pressure's on them. The pressure's on New Jersey as well, because again, if they lose and Florida wins, then they're 1 or 2 points up, depending on whether or not that loss would be in overtime. But they're 1 or 2 points up, and still Florida would have those games in hand. For LA, this is an important game because they want to come out ahead of the other California teams, and they might be looking further up and going, Vegas is 11 points ahead. Maybe it's not going to happen, but maybe you look ahead and you think, maybe we get a shot at this. Again, the odds of it are pretty astronomically against, but it's fun to think about. Anyways, New Jersey. And I know Devils fans aren't happy with me right now. And it's funny because last week they were happy with me for saying that both Danico and Doc Emmerich were excellent announcers. And now because I look at New Jersey's schedule and I say, geez, this is a rough schedule. This is brutal. Yeah, it comes across badly, and I apologize, but I'm not going to take it back because, I'm not going to look at a tough schedule and go, yeah, they'll get it. Sometimes it takes that step before you reach the playoffs. And that could be the case this year for New Jersey. There's no shame if New Jersey misses the playoffs. None whatsoever. For LA, there would be, though. And I think that's why LA's played with more of a sense of urgency over the last 10, 15 games. Next up, Boston. So the Bruins coming off of a shutout loss against Florida. They're 44-17-8. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They lost their last game. They've lost 2 out of 3. They're in Tampa. Tampa's 48-18-4. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10. They lost their last game, which was against Ottawa. So Tampa should be angry. Boston's 4 points behind Tampa. Of course, they have games in hand. They're 5 points up on Toronto, who they also have games in hand on. And for Tampa, well, you do the math. They're 4 points ahead of Boston and 9 points ahead of Toronto. This could be the difference between Boston challenging for a division or just fading. If they lose this one tomorrow night, and if they lose it in regulation, it's not a shameful thing for Boston. It's not a really helpful thing for Boston either. I've had my concerns with their play, and now it's started to result in a couple of losses. And it'll probably be Vasilevsky, Boston's confirmed Rask at this point. And I want to say, Boston will win this. That would be great if they did. But I'm not really holding my breath on this one. Because if Boston wins this one somehow, then Tampa's really feeling the heat. Because Boston would either be 3 or 2 points back, depending on whether that win was in regulation or overtime. All Boston has to do is go out and win the game, which seems like a simple task until you look on the other side of the ice, and you look at the team that has been put together for Tampa, and it's an intimidating lineup. and they're playing very well. And for Tampa, the other thing in their favor might be the fact that any chasing the President's Trophy might be a little bit out of reach right now. They're 4 points back, I think, of Nashville. And maybe that's something that players are like, who cares? Only matters if we meet them in the final, and even then, we're Tampa, we can beat them. Next up, Montreal. 26, 33, and 12 altogether. They're 3-4-3 in their last 10. They lost their last game. They're in Toronto. The Maple Leafs are 42, 22, and 7, 6-2 and 2 in their last 10, and they won their last 3. Montreal, there's nothing to mention with playoffs because they're not going there. Toronto's 5 points behind Boston. They're in third place. Of course, they've played 2 more games. They're still 14 points ahead of Florida. So as great as Florida's been over the last 10 games, and basically their last 20, they're still 14 points behind Toronto. Toronto's entrenched in third place. Now, if Toronto wins tonight, or tomorrow night, and Boston loses, they're 3 points back of Boston. But again, they've played the 2 extra games. It's going to be very difficult for them to catch up to anybody. They're third, which I think is a very good standing for them. Remember, last year they were a wild card team. This is a gradual build for Toronto. They were the worst team in the league 2 years ago. They move up into a playoff spot last year, which surprised pretty much everybody. And this year it's about just a smaller step. A smaller step forward. And I think the big leap is still coming. Certainly the latest edition of the Hockey News' prospects issue, the Future Watch. Yeah, there's a lot of Maple Leafs talk in there, and they grade them as the number 1 prospect pool in the league, and they're all gushing and happy. And I'm not going to argue with any of that. And tomorrow night they get to show it against Montreal. Toronto's record against Montreal historically, not great. But this is a team that doesn't know they're supposed to lose. I said that a lot last year about Toronto. This team doesn't know they're supposed to lose. And that could lead to some success in the playoffs this year. Because they're not bound by any previous history. They don't have any of those ghosts to them. They don't exist. That's somebody else. Another team's history. They're blazing their own trail, and they've got quite a core for which to do it. For Montreal, they're playing out the string. They could be a bit of a spoiler to Toronto. If Boston wins, Toronto loses. Toronto's 7 points back of Boston. And Montreal would love to go in there and get a couple of points against Toronto. And that would just make the tank nation in Montreal angrier. So, the tanking doesn't necessarily mean anything. You look at the teams that got the first 3 draft picks last year. Anyways, but that doesn't matter. Anytime I mention that, people point out whatever. Ottawa, 26, 33, and 11. So they're 1 point back of Montreal with 1 less overtime loss. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10, so they're going in a different direction than Montreal. They've won their last 3. I erroneously said 4 tonight. I'm sorry. Columbus, 38, 28, and 5 overall. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and the last 6 wins were in a row. They're the number 1 wild card, but they're tied with Philly for third place in the Metro. Columbus is an interesting team. So they fell right off the pace, and as recently as 2 weeks ago, they were favored to miss the playoffs. It looked like they'd missed the playoffs. They've turned it around. They've put together a very good string, which is good because the Metro desperately needed it. And now they're in a position to potentially pass Philly and move into that third spot, which right now puts them against Pittsburgh. Nobody wants Pittsburgh. But it would be a very interesting rematch if we had Pittsburgh and Columbus in the first round again. For that second year in a row. And I don't know who wins that. Only because I do think that Pittsburgh's weaker right now. Due to the injury to Matt Murray. And I know Murray's close to coming back. But what shape is he going to be in? What shape is that blue line in? And are they really good enough to knock out a Columbus team that's playing really, really well right now? And I don't know the answer to that. I do know this, that it is not unusual for a team that's won a Stanley Cup to go out in the first round the following year. I know because as a fan of the Bruins, I watched them do it in 2012. Where it was like, all right, defending Stanley Cup champions, are they going to repeat? They're out already? What the? I hadn't even got I didn't even open my drink yet. What do you mean they're out? What do you mean I gotta leave? Not my fault. This isn't my house. Do you know where my house? No. Okay. It's just really rude. And then Boston's out of the playoffs, and I'm lost in some nobody's neighborhood. It's sad. So yeah, Columbus has a shot against Pittsburgh. That's the point I'm bringing out. Next up, Philly. Aforementioned Philly, 35, 25, and 11 altogether. 3-6-1 in their last 10. They've lost their last 2. Lyon has been confirmed as the starting goaltender for Philly. Debate in the comment section below how you feel about that before the game starts. Carolina, 30, 29, and 11 overall. 3-6-1 in their last 10, and they've lost their last 2. These guys are so disappointing. I'm going to put their logo upside down because in my eyes they're in distress. Getting rid of the GM and talks of changing things around in Carolina. This year was supposed to be different. I thought it would be different. There were 2 publications that predicted them to make the playoffs, and it's another year of different disappointment. And what do you do? What do you do? I get that Tom Dundon wants to turn things around, but how? You've got all these young guys. You can't trade them for veterans because you're not that close. Look at Philly. Philly last year was a disappointment for them, but this year it's been a relatively good story. And all of these young kids in Philly are coming together. Carolina needs to win a lottery. Get Rasmus Dahlin, and next year they look great. Philly's third place tie with Columbus is problematic because while you don't necessarily want to play Pittsburgh, you don't want to go into the playoffs on a cold stretch. And not only that, but you don't want to fall down to the second wild card and play Tampa. That's really not on the list of things you want to do. Not at all. So Philly's got a big game here, and while Carolina's been in a tailspin, as much as of a distressed team as they are, Philly just has this way with bad luck. They've got a 3-6-1 record in their last 10, the same as Carolina. So they have to pull out of it, and they have to do it against a team that's really been struggling more than they have. So if you're going to do it, Philly, now's a good time. Next up, the Rangers. 32, 27, and 7 overall. They're 5-3-2 in their last 10. They've won their last 2. Nope. All right, fixed it. The Rangers are 32, 32, and 7. I saw that. I'm like, wait, they're 5 games above 500? No, they're not. They're 5-3-2 in their last 10. They won their last 2. And Gorgiev is going back into net. I will never get used to saying Gorgiev. I'll just... Bulgarian brute. Gorgiev goes in. They're in St. Louis against the Blues, who are 37, 28, and 5. They're 3-6-1 in their last 10. They lost their last game. St. Louis is 5 games out of the second wild card, or 5 points behind the second wild card spot. This is as close to an elimination game as you're going to see for tomorrow night, anyways. If St. Louis loses this one, as far as I'm concerned, they're done. They're at home against the Rangers. Well, I like Gorgiev, and I like what he's been doing, and it's an exciting time to see a young goaltender come out of nowhere. And over the coming days and weeks with the Future Watch issue, I intend to look through and pick out some guys that I think might be flying under the radar. There's always guys on those lists that are flying under the radar, and for whatever reason, they don't rate them very highly. And a guy like Gorgiev will come out of nowhere. St. Louis wants to take that feel-good story and squash it. They want to squash it. Gorgiev's playing again because the Rangers want to see what they've got in him. Is he worthy of being a backup full-time next year? Is he potentially going to be a replacement for Lundqvist? Is he that good? So they're going to give him a lot of looks down the stretch. St. Louis, again, wants to just ruin it. Because St. Louis doesn't have any leeway left. And I said they were done a couple weeks ago, and I'm being as diplomatic as possible because they're still mathematically in it. It's just they are slowly falling out of it. Very slowly falling out of it. And they now have to pass 3 teams to make the playoffs. They have to pass Calgary, Anaheim, Colorado. It gets more and more difficult. They're making it hard on themselves. And it feels like this is what Doug Armstrong had in mind at the deadline when he traded away Stastny. That, all right, well, we're not going to make it, so I'll trade away Stastny and get something back. because we're not going to re-sign him in the offseason anyways. We're not a contender this year, so we'll do what we got to do and get something back. And I applaud him for that, but I do wonder, like, if if they do miss the playoffs, and it looks like right now that they're going to, what next? Who stays? Who goes? What do you do? It'll be interesting to see what the GM does. If the GM stays, if the team doesn't decide to get rid of the GM, what's going to happen? Next up, because there isn't much else to discuss with that game. Minnesota, 40-24-7. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They won their last game. They're in Arizona against the Coyotes, who are 23-36-11. They're 6-3-1, and they lost their last game. Arizona doesn't seem to care about tanking either, which is good. They're at 57 points. They're 2 points behind the next higher-up team in the Pacific Division that I'll get to in a minute. Minnesota has an excellent record. And if it wasn't for playing against Colorado, it would be even better. 87 points are darn good. Just as an example, 87 points. Toronto has 91. There's a lot of talk about Toronto and the issue they'll have if they play against Boston in the playoffs. Minnesota would get to play Winnipeg. So Minnesota's right there with them. I really like what Minnesota's got going on right now. I know that anytime they play Colorado, it falls apart. But I do like the team very much. What happens with them in the first round between them and Winnipeg, if that's how things shake down, and it looks like that's probably what's going to happen, I really don't know. But I know that going in tonight and putting on a pretty good clinic against Vegas, playing some Vegas hockey, it's a good omen, and now they head into Arizona. And I know Arizona's been playing very well. They've got a very good record over their last 20-some games. But Minnesota is the better team, and I would expect Minnesota to win this. As great as the hot streak for Arizona's been, it's going to cool down. And when it cools down, it's going to be probably, a 4 or 5 game losing streak type thing. So we'll see if that's where they're at. We'll see if they do end up finishing last and getting the best chance at the number 1 draft pick at the lottery. But for now, Arizona's, and the funny thing is, I'm half tempted to throw up an Admiral Akbar, and I might as well. What the heck? I'm half tempted to throw up an Akbar and say, yeah, it's a trap, and maybe Arizona pulls this off, but I just can't see, even though it's a back-to-back, I just can't see Minnesota losing this one. There's too much on the line for them. And last but not least, the San Jose Sharks, 39-23-9. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. They've won their last 3. They're in to play the worst team in the league right now. Vancouver Canucks are 25-37-9. They're 3 points clear of last overall. They're 2-6-2 in their last 10. They've lost their last 5. San Jose is second in the division. They're 3 points ahead of LA. They're 28 points ahead of Vancouver. There was an interesting article today, I think it was on Sportsnet, about whether or not Canuck fans are far too accepting of what's going on with this team, and we're not angry enough. And it goes into all these stats that prove we should be angry about the money being spent, and all these veterans being brought in, and the team doesn't get any better, and there's no vision. And it's all the same crap I've been reading for the last year. You bring in these veterans because the rookies aren't ready. If you don't bring in veterans as a cushion to keep the rookies from being rushed into the league, you're in the same situation that Columbus was in for years. The same situation Florida's found themselves in at times over the last 10, 20 years. The situation that other teams like Edmonton have found themselves in time and time again. You rush kids to the league who aren't ready, you damage their long-term future in the NHL. I agree, Vancouver's been pathetic this year. It's been awful. It has been horrible to watch. They're boring. They're slow. They're not particularly talented. Brock Besser was the best player on the ice for them all season when he's played, and it is disturbing that he gets injured as much as he has, and it's only his rookie year. Bo Horvat's shown plenty of growth and improvement. Berchi showed some improvement this year. Berchi's out hurt. There's not a whole lot to choose from on this team right now. But when I see people just piling on and talking about how horrible and awful and horrible and awful it is, I'm reminded of the Maple Leafs 2 years ago before they got Austin Matthews, when everything was bleak there too. Remember, the thing that helped the Maple Leafs wasn't just Matthews. It was that they had Nylander, who was a ringer, waiting in the American League, and they had Marner waiting to come up as well. The Canucks are going to have a top draft pick this year, and Pettersson's coming over. So you're going to have Pettersson in the lineup. Odds are, if they end up drafting in the top 5, the player they draft in the top 5 could very well end up being in the lineup next year. I'm kind of pulling for Brady Tkachuk. There's a part of me saying, you know what, Brady Tkachuk would be kind of fun on the Canucks. You have Tkachuk and Pettersson and Horvat and Berchi and Besser. You've got a pretty good start to the offense right there. Things could turn around pretty quick. Levy believes he's ready for top 4 ice time in the NHL. He's played very well this year against men, and you know, for all intents and purposes, it looks like he's ready to come over. And Thatcher Demko is putting up insane numbers in the American Hockey League. That being said, tomorrow night San Jose is probably going to kill them. The Sharks have this incredible record against Vancouver, and I don't think it matters if it's in Vancouver or in San Jose. San Jose is just very dominant. The Sharks, I doubt they're looking ahead and going, well, if we can win this one, we get within 6 points of Vegas, maybe. That may be a driving motivation for them, but I really think just staying healthy, staying on a good run, staying in their systems. They've proven they can beat Vancouver this year. They'll have no problem beating Vancouver again tomorrow night. In my eyes, anyways. I could always put... See, Akbar won't even go over there. Akbar was like, screw that. I'm going to hit the floor. I can't even make it a trap game because Akbar decided to fall on the floor. I don't know how else to put it. Admiral Akbar has decided, that's it. I'm out. He won't touch Vancouver. He doesn't want to be next to the Canucks. And right now, most people don't. I'm okay with it because I think the future isn't as dark as some people think it is. Not as dark as this jersey, for instance. But hey, to each their own. Everybody has their own opinions. And that's sort of the way the internet works. But thank you very much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. These are the 10 games for tomorrow night. I'm now going to enjoy a beverage because my throat's kind of dry. But hey, this is what happens when I'm working. And that's a situation that I'm going to resolve shortly. And between now and then, that's it for me for now. You guys being out there makes it worth being here. I'll talk to you again soon.